welcome back to another episode of the VBACpodcast. Today we are going to be talking a little bit about VBAC, a little bit about breastfeeding, and a little bit about birth control and how do those three things work together? How are they connected? We're going to find out.
Hey Mama Bear, was your last birth a C-section and you have been dreaming of a vaginal birth ever since? Maybe you are newly pregnant and planning a VBAC, but struggling to get straight answers and support. If you're dreaming of a healing, positive, and peaceful vaginal birth after cesarean, you're in the right place. Welcome to the VBAC podcast. I'm your host, Jamie Zaki, and I am a licensed practical nurse, international board, certified lactation consultant, and birth doula. I'm also a mama to 4 little bears and a 3-time VBAC mama. My mission is to help you cultivate confidence for a positive and peaceful VBAC.
This is a disclaimer that any of the information, experiences, opinions, and stories told on this podcast are with the intention of inspiring, educating, and informing parents. This information is not intended to treat or diagnose any medical conditions. If you have questions, you must consult your provider. Jamie Zaki does not accept liability for any decisions that you make after listening to this podcast.
So obviously, if you are planning a VBAC, maybe you're not pregnant yet. You might be here listening to the VBAC podcast because you had a C-section and you're not pregnant yet, but you're planning a VBAC and you want to give yourself the best chance possible. And one of the things you heard is that in order to have a successful VBAC, in order to reduce your risk of uterine rupture, you need to space your pregnancies so that you're giving birth at least 18 months apart or 24 months apart or whatever. I have an episode that goes deeper into those guidelines, but today what I want to talk to you about is, well, how do you space those pregnancies, especially if you are somebody who doesn't want to use hormonal birth control or condoms. If you're Catholic, like I am, and NFP is your approach, but maybe you aren't actually too experienced with NFP, especially postpartum, you might be really concerned about how to space those pregnancies. And you might be wondering about the common, I don't want to say myth or misconception because it's not fully a myth, but the belief that you can utilize breastfeeding as birth control. We are going to dive into all of that today. So this is going to be a great episode and I cannot wait to share some of my experiences and wisdom. I'm not even going to call it wisdom, it's knowledge, and like barely scratches the surface on that because I am a novice. I am not an NFP pro by any means, but we'll talk about that today. I will share with you what I do know. All right, so today we are talking about spacing pregnancies for a better chance of VBAC, how to do that when you're breastfeeding, and what birth control after VBAC can look like, especially if you are a fertility awareness, NFP kind of mama. Why is spacing your pregnancy important? Like I said in the intro, we have an episode that goes into spacing pregnancies and how far your pregnancies need to be spaced, what the data says, and more about that. But common recommendations are to try and space your pregnancies apart about, wait till you're about a year postpartum, 9 months to 12 months postpartum before getting pregnant again, because ideally giving birth to birth, 18 to 24 months is kind of the sweet spot they consider for the lowest risk when planning a VBAC. Now, that episode goes into a lot more detail and nuance on why that is not a hard, fast rule, so don't get stressed out about that. But it's also important to say, okay, that is the goal for a lot of people, because even if that is not, even if it doesn't affect your risk of VBAC, personally, I believe in allowing the body a year at least to heal from pregnancy. I also highly value breastfeeding for a minimum of a year and getting pregnant before that year is up risks impacting milk supply and therefore sabotaging that goal. So for many of us, that year of postpartum, it's very important to us to not get pregnant again. So if you're there, you're within that year and you're like, I really want to have this VBAC. I want space between my babies. I want space between this pregnancy. But how do I make that happen? How do I make that happen? What is the best way to do that? I want to talk to you because what you might be thinking is, well, I am breastfeeding and I know that breastfeeding can suppress fertility. So isn't that good enough? And I'm going to answer with a resounding no. It is not good enough. Breastfeeding can, for many women, induce infertility. Not in a negative way, but it can suppress ovulation is probably the better way to say that. It can suppress ovulation postpartum. That's how it's designed. That is the point. In order for that to happen, a lot of things need to be like line up and be in place. So you're breastfeeding your baby every so often. They're not sucking on a pacifier. They're not sleeping more than 4 to 5 hours at a time. They're not this. They're not that. You're doing this. You're doing that. Your cycle hasn't returned. This and that and this and that. And so there's a lot that in our modern society is not happening. So if you can't check all of those boxes, you're already increasing the risk that breastfeeding might not induce infertility for you. It's called lactation amenorrhea or lactational amenorrhea. That's the technical term for it. But okay, so you're not cycling, eventually you will. And typically, it's around 6 months that people will start to see their fertility return, that we say breastfeeding, definitely no. Like if you are before the 6 month mark and you're breastfeeding, like you have higher chances of breastfeeding helping you stay infertile. However, again, that's not a hard and fast rule. And you oftentimes might ovulate before you get your period. So if you're going based off, oh, well, I haven't had my period, it doesn't mean you didn't ovulate. And then you catch that first ovulation. Yeah, you know how it works, I hope. But breastfeeding can still be a huge part of the puzzle. And I feel like too often in this conversation, we're like, okay, somebody's over here saying breastfeeding is birth control, so you can just not worry about birth control as long as you're breastfeeding. And then people get pregnant and they're like, what the hell? I thought you couldn't get pregnant while you're breastfeeding. Well, you can. But on the other hand, there's like people who are like, stop saying breastfeeding is birth control. It's not. It's dangerous to say that. And like, I get where they're coming from. But y'all, it can be a big part of the picture, especially with NFP. You can, quote, use breastfeeding as part of your birth control. I don't even like the word birth control. Like, I hate that word. That word is disgusting to me. Birth control. Like, first of all, this entire podcast is about not controlling birth. Right? Right? Is that, it's like controlling what you can, release the rest. So why we say birth control? How about pregnancy prevention? Okay, that's what we'll say. Contraception. I don't like that word either. It's just, it sounds so sterile and clinical. And it's like, pregnancy prevention is actually a lot deeper than that. So, I am trying not to go off on a tangent with y'all about my feelings on birth control and the lies that we are told. And maybe I'll just save an episode for that. But what we're talking about is breastfeeding and birth control. So if you're using fertility awareness method, natural family planning, forms of birth control, breastfeeding can be a huge part of the puzzle if you are not depending just on that. If you are watching for the other fertility signs. If you are in touch with your body and aware of your body. So you might be like, okay, well, how do I do that? It can be harder for some people to practice NFP during that lactational amenorrhea stage. So it's like a double-edged sword. Like, it's like, okay, on one hand, I'm like, this is great. It's delaying my fertility. That's exactly what I wanted. But I do need to know when I ovulate. And so now I feel like in an abundance of caution, I just need to avoid sex altogether, because if I randomly ovulate and don't know how to look out for it, then this whole thing just didn't work. And it can be stressful. That's what we're talking about. And that was a really long-winded 10-minute way of telling you that's what we're going to talk about. I'm so sorry. So my favorite method of birth control, pregnancy prevention, natural family planning for postpartum, while breastfeeding, before cycles return, is the Marquette method. It can be a little crazy for some people. Yeah, there's like, you got to take classes to learn it. It's kind of hard to access, unfortunately, but it works. It works. Marquette works. So you don't have to be Catholic to learn natural family planning. You don't have to be Catholic like I am to say, I don't want to take birth control. I don't want an IUD. I don't like condoms. I want to be in sync with my body, but I need to know how to do that. And nobody's telling me how. Take a Marquette class for postpartum. Seriously, take a Marquette class for postpartum. I learned symptothermal first. So that's, watching your mucus, checking your cervix, and taking your temperature every day. I learned that first, and that was great when I was trying to conceive. It's great when you have a cycle. It is not so great when you don't have a cycle and you're waking up every couple hours to breastfeed because then your temps are all screwed up. Temp drop helps with that. I do not get any kind of kickback for recommending temp drop, but I just got my temp drop last month and I'm already loving it. So I have switched back to symptothermal from Marquette now that I am 15 months postpartum and my cycle has returned. I am still breastfeeding, but my cycle has returned, and Marquette started to become complicated for me because I was ovulating very late in my cycle. So it just the rules changed and I got very frustrated. Felt like I was spending a lot of money, kept missing ovulation. Marquette was not working for me anymore. Do what works for you. Marquette works very well with their 10-day protocol when you are not actually cycling, when you're preparing to cycle. Or at least it did for me. There are some people who I know say that they didn't like it, but most women that I've talked to tell me Marquette is the best for when I was breastfeeding because it's very non-subjective. It is very objective. It measures hormone levels and tells you if you're at risk of getting pregnant or not. If you're at risk of ovulating soon or not. Now, for a lot of women, I will caveat that with, as you get closer to ovulation, you will have more high unusable days that you're like, okay, my body is gearing up to ovulate, and then it doesn't. And that can be frustrating, but it's okay. It's okay. And then once you do start cycling, you do have a little more predictability, I think. Especially if you ovulate earlier in your cycle, Marquette will still be awesome for you. I really liked Marquette. But because I do ovulate super late while breastfeeding, I went back to symptothermal because it just makes more sense for me. But I just wanted to let you know that there are options. And there are so many other options out there. There's the Billings method, there's Creighton, and these are all typically associated with Catholic families. And I know not all of you are Catholic, so you might not have heard of these resources because I, even as somebody who's Catholic, born and raised, did not hear of these resources until the last 10 years. And that's only because I immersed myself in the NFP world and was asking for it. So if you haven't been asking for somebody to tell you resources on natural family planning, non-hormonal birth control, non-IUD, none of this fake artificial crap, and you just want to work with your cycles, these are great resources. While they are typically geared toward Catholic couples, anybody is welcome to take these classes. They're not going to tell you that you can't take the class because you're Catholic. They're just going to teach you from a Catholic perspective. Take what you want, take what works for you, leave the rest. Anyway, that is my spiel today on my tips for avoiding pregnancy, postpartum, to space your pregnancies for a better chance of VBAC, for a more positive VBAC. NFP, breastfeeding, Doesn't always work together. It can be hard. Marquette makes it easier. Symptothermal works once your cycles return. And don't rely on breastfeeding alone as birth control. It can be a helpful piece of the puzzle. Don't depend on it by itself. Learn your other fertility signs. Get in touch with your body. Learn how to read your body and understand your body. You're not broken. Society just kept this hidden from you for the past 20, 25, 30, 35 years. That's not fair to you. There is a learning curve. It's okay, because you can learn it and your body does work. Even if your body works different than what a textbook says, your body works. So learn how to work with your body. Learn how to work with your body in birth. Learn how to work with your body in breastfeeding. Learn how to work with your body in pregnancy prevention. That's what we're about here. So I know this episode was maybe a little off topic from VBAC specific, but I think it's important. I think it's really important for the people who are in the mindset of pregnancy prevention right now, but still want to plan their VBAC and prepare for their VBAC and feel that pregnancy prevention is a huge part of that. Excuse me. I feel like this is an important conversation to have. So that's my spiel. If you have any questions on NFP, if you are looking for any resources, please reach out to me. I will connect you with people. I do not know everything about NFP, but I've got some amazing resources, and I'm probably going to put this episode up as a blog too and link more resources with it. So if I do that, I will link that in the show notes, because I'm going to link more resources like books that are going to be so good for you, like Taking Charge of Your Fertility. Sheila Kipley has a couple really good books, again, from the Catholic perspective, but they're awesome. Like, they have so much good information in them, and you deserve to hear it. So whether or not you, like, I don't care about your religious affiliation, these resources can still be so, like, they still have so much good information in them that is not in a lot of other resources. All right, I'm gonna go ahead and sign off here because I am starting to get really long-winded and repeat myself, and I don't need to waste any more of your time. But I did want to remind you that if you are getting excited for your VBAC, but you still have some fears and you haven't signed up for the free Combating Fear During VBAC class, do it now, right now. Click the link in the show notes, Combating Fear During VBAC. It's a free class. It's 30 minutes of your time, but I swear to you, it is like a great use of 30 minutes compared with scrolling Facebook and Facebook groups and birth groups or Googling your VBAC questions. Like, that 30-minute class is going to help you reframe your mindset and reframe your fears around VBAC so much faster, so much quicker than like an hour of scrolling your phone will. So make good use of your time. Check out that free class. Signing up for the free class puts you on my free VIP list where we can connect, we can chat, and we can work together. You can find out about all the ways we can work together and how I can help you achieve the VBAC of your dreams. I look forward to talking with you again next week, Mama Bear. Bye-bye.